The former president of the United States, after the 2020 election campaign, repeated several untrue claims in which he claimed that the 2020 election campaign was stolen and was fraudulent. That ultimately led to his supporters storming the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th, and which was a truly unprecedented event that also has led to the formation of the January 6th Select Committee, in which they have invited numerous people to testify. And today, never before heard testimony from a former White House aide who was an aide to the former White House presidential chief of staff, Cassidy Hutchinson. And joining me now to discuss the latest as to what took place at the committee today is Claudia Grisales. Thanks so much for making the time, and it's great to chat with you. Let's just start out with, again, that main piece from the committee today. We got several new details where Cassidy Hutchinson went over the exchange that her and Rudy Giuliani had when Rudy Giuliani went over some of the things that basically told her almost, I believe she said for the first time, what he was expecting to happen on January 6th. How much of a role did the allies of the former president, Donald Trump, play in January 6th? And again, allies, I gave the example of Rudy Giuliani, but perhaps there were a few others as well.
Yes, there were others. And starting with Giuliani, that is a fantastic example that you raise. Giuliani had told Hutchinson, according to her testimony, that January 6th, this was days before January 6th, 2021, but that January 6th was going to be a, quote, great day. He also said that the then President Trump would appear powerful on that day. And it was clear from Hutchinson's testimony today, she was disturbed by those remarks, that she hurried back to talk to her boss about this, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows at the time, and raised concern of what is he talking about, trying to get a better sense. It also illustrated how powerful Trump's allies were in terms of those who were pushing for this effort at that time to overturn the 2020 election results. And yes, Giuliani was one of those figures who was very loudly calling for those election results to be overturned and looking at all sorts of ways to see how they could make that happen. And Meadows as well was one of these powerful allies on that day in the weeks leading up, as many warned that there was danger to the democracy for proceeding down this path, that there was warnings for violence that could be unleashed at the US Capitol. And it was clear that Meadows, at many moments, according to Hutchinson's testimony, rebuffed these kind of concerns. Rather, he paid more attention to folks like his boss, the then President Trump, and others such as Giuliani and other powerful allies within this circle that were pushing this effort to find any way possible that they saw as an opportune way to overturn these elections results by January 6th of last year.
To what extent would it be fair to say that there was like almost division amongst White House staffers, whether it be between, say, Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, and Cassidy Hutchinson? It seems, based off of her testimony today, that, you know, she was like her and Mark Meadows were like going back and forth between each other on a lot of those issues. Do you think ultimately Mark Meadows was siding more with the president, or was he taking the side of his aide Cassidy Hutchinson that testified today?
Yeah, it was clear that Meadows was very much following the lead of his boss, then President Trump, and trying to ensure whatever he wanted to see happen was happening in many cases. And so Hutchinson, in her testimony, did detail this division that you refer to. She said there were basically three camps at the White House. There was Group One, who was raising concerns. This includes White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who warned Meadows, for example, during the attack, as it escalated, there will be blood on your hands, and other warnings that Cipollone issued about crimes that could be committed along this path of trying to overturn the results, and looking at Trump himself going to the Capitol, going to the House chamber on the day of January 6th last year. All of this was raising alarm. So Cipollone, and yes, you can see from Hutchinson's testimony, she was part of this first group that was sounding an alarm in their own ways of within the White House of concerns of of what they were hearing about this effort. There were two other groups, she said. There was another group that was also concerned, but they were the quiet group. They were not saying a lot about those concerns out loud. And then there was a third and final group, which was the blame others group, distract, and false claims of blame for groups that had no role in the attack on January 6th and claiming they were part of it. And so it's clear from her testimony, and this also feeds into other testimony we've heard in previous hearings and other testimony behind closed doors that we've seen excerpts of depositions, that there was clear division at the White House, and this triggered a lot of chaos in terms of who was on what team and what they were up to.
And Hutchison said today that in an exchange that her and Mark Meadows had, Meadows said to her that things might get real bad on January 6th, and I'm quoting there. So if there was that, I guess, sense of awareness within the White House amongst people like Mark Meadows, would it have been possible for more to have been done? And what might that have looked like? Again, given that the presidential chief of staff was kind of acknowledging that things could look bad on January 6th before it even happened.
And when you talk about more could have been done, what do you mean when you say more could have been done? In what way?
I guess just, again, the sense of Mark Meadows kind of, again, knowing that things could get bad on January 6th, but then obviously it still led to the insurrection of the U.S. Capitol.
Right. You know, many watchers of this testimony, perhaps in Hutchinson's case as well, you could hear in her testimony that Meadows received multiple warnings ahead of January 6th and was alerted the day of, again, by Cipollone, for example, warning about blood on his hands, that things could get bad. And so that's exactly the moment that Meadows, during these warnings from many others outside of this inner tight circle of allies that were pushing for the overturning of these election results from 2020, outside of that circle, that had perhaps Meadows listened and say, yes, you know, let's stop this plan. We can't go further. It's dangerous, for example, as the former director of intelligence, this is former Texas Congressman Ratcliffe, said this is dangerous for democracy. This is what Hutchinson testified that he said to her. And so that danger, that exact danger, if there was an awareness by Meadows, some would argue that he could have stopped this before it ever began.
And Hutchison said today that, you know, when the president, when she did hear the president talking about January 6th, like in the days sort of leading up to that, he said something along the lines of "let my people in." The president's kind of rejecting those claims he posted on his new social media platform regarding that. How much credibility does the former president actually have on this, again, considering his repeated lies over the 2020 election and how that was fraudulent?
Well, when you talk to his supporters, to his allies, he has a lot of credibility. What he says goes. And so a lot of folks who do believe and trust in this president, regardless of any kind of news stories that have come out during his term of presidency or after, it has a lot of credibility what the president says, and many will likely agree and say, you know, this is false information. But on the other side of that, when we look at individuals who have not bought into some of these false claims that former President Trump has shared multiple times about widespread fraud in the 2020 election, for example, this is going to deepen their concerns in terms of what they're hearing and saying, this is more evidence that goes to this case that the former president at that time, when he was in the Oval, was pushing for this overturning of the election's results and getting to some very extreme options on how to make that happen.
Okay, Claudia Grisales, thanks so much for making the time, Congressional Correspondent at NPR. Claudia, thanks again so much for your time and for providing your perspective on today's very unique, I would say, January 6th committee hearing.
Thank you. So good to join you.